You are listening to the Life in Attleboro Podcast, where we interview the city's most interesting people who are making a positive difference in our community. Hey everyone, I'm the host of the Life in Attleboro Podcast, Mike Sullivan. I recently had the opportunity to interview Attleboro's Fire Chief, Chief Lachance. He was very gracious with his time and provided some really good insight about the department itself, how his team approaches every single fire, no matter how big or small. And he also shared some personal information to help you get to know the man behind the title. I really enjoyed this very interesting discussion, and I hope you do too. Here's episode 14 of the Life in Attleboro Podcast. Okay, joining me now is Attleboro's Fire Chief, Chief Lachance. Chief, thank you so much for taking the time to be a guest on the Life in Attleboro Podcast. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invite. I do appreciate it.
Likewise. So I want to start with the fire department itself. Attleboro's population hovers around 48,000 residents or so. So how many fire stations are in the city, and how many total firefighters are in the department right now?
We have 4 fire stations. We have headquarters, which is on Union Street. We have the South Attleboro Fire Station, which is the newer one, built in 1999. And then close to the Seekonk line on Route 152 is Twin Village Station. And down next to Briggs Corner Pizzeria is the other outlying station, Briggs Corner Fire Station. At full staffing, which we're pretty close to being fully staffed, I have approximately 100 firefighters if you count all ranks.
Very good. I actually was looking in one of the Facebook groups a few days ago, and a woman had posted in one of the Everything Attleboro groups, and she wanted to thank Station 4 because her husband had stepped on a ground hornet, and they didn't know he was allergic, and he went into anaphylactic shock. And the firefighters at Station 4 essentially helped save his life. So she wanted to send a thank you to that. So yeah, kudos to you. And that kind of brings me to my next question here. So how many incidents would you say the fire department responds to each and every year?
We are hovering right around 10,000 calls annually. When I became chief 14 years ago, it was 5,500 calls. So that's a conversation I have with all of the city officials on a regular basis, that the communities with the high demand for service. And as it grows, the city needs to start making some plans for the future of how we're going to be able to get to those calls. 30 plus calls a day is normal for us. 40 is not unheard of. It's pretty busy.
Wow, that is crazy. And when you took over 14 years ago, Chief, do you know what the staff was, around what level the staffing was when you took over?
Yeah, we were probably staffed at about 85 or so.
Okay. So, yeah, so the population has outgrown the staffing.
Yes. One of the things that we did when I became chief, one of the first things was we did a major reorganizational plan of the way that the fire department structure operated. Then we had several trucks that didn't have an officer on them. So we had employees working without supervision, and officers are trained at different levels. There's a whole bunch that goes into their training. And it was becoming a danger, especially with younger employees. So we were able to do a complete change in our structure. So we added a different rank. So we added lieutenants. So now we operate, every piece of fire apparatus has an officer in charge. We also didn't have an assistant fire chief. We do now. I'd like to take credit for it, but a lot of what was in that plan for the restructure, my predecessor, Ron Churchill, had worked on. I changed it a little bit, but I was fortunate that Kevin Dumas was a mayor at the time and understood the need, and the city council saw the need for future expansion. So we're actually in a place now that as the city grows, because we have the right command structure in place, it's easy to expand when the need arises.
Are you comfortable with staffing levels at this moment?
Comfortable, yeah. Yeah, my concern is not like today. My concern would be 5 to 7 years from now. Obviously, EMS is a big part of what we do. We're a full paramedic level service. We do 7,000 medical calls a year. I'm still a paramedic. When I got hired on the fire department in 2000, I apologize for that radio in the background, but there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah, no worries.
But when I got hired in 2000, I was one of 8 paramedics on the fire department. And now, if I count my offices, although they're not assigned to the ambulance, I'm probably 65 to 75 paramedics in the fire department. Even the people that have moved up in their careers and are not assigned to the ambulance regularly maintain their skills and their knowledge. And the amount of skill and knowledge that these paramedics have today is pretty impressive. I'm not anywhere near close to where they're at. To literally say they save lives every day is not an understatement. They really, the amount of medications that they carry Even little things like when I became a paramedic, we didn't do 12 lead EKGs in the field. So we would do a regular 4 lead EKG. We knew somebody was having a heart attack. We'd take them to the local hospital. Now the guys in the field are completely capable of diagnosing the type of, we call myocardial infarction, but they can tell exactly the type of heart attack you're having, and they can determine right in the field that you need to go to a cath lab, and we immediately go to Rhode Island Hospital or Miriam. And those are the things that change what we do so much, because the call, when I first got on, half an hour from start to finish. Now some of these calls are taking an hour and a half because they're going to Rhode Island Hospital, to a cath lab, spend some time there doing the paperwork, and then coming back. It's a good thing. It's great for the community. We have an outstanding EMS service. I'm really proud of the work they do.
That's great. And then those hour and a half calls, if another incident happens in the city, there's enough staff to backfill, right?
Yeah, there is. When it gets exceedingly busy, that's where you rely on mutual aid. We had a fire yesterday afternoon on Carpenter Street, and just by the luck of the draw, there were 4 medical calls going on in the city at the exact same time. So all my ambulances were out. Half of the fire engines were out. The deputy was in service, and the fire engine had to come from South Attleboro. The guys were able to clear up, so it wasn't a problem. But I'm about statistics. I like data, and I like to be able to show the decision makers and the stakeholders in the city. And I'm certainly not panic stricken. I just said we just need to plan, because the city grows, the demand for services grows. So I'm always able to show them the data to say we're certainly not in trouble, but we better be mindful of what we're doing and start to look at the future.
Makes sense. Always good to be prepared for the future, Chief. Thank you. So obviously you mentioned about 10,000 incidents and calls per year. Obviously there aren't that many fires. You touched on all the medical calls, but I know you and your team do a lot of other little things, calls. So besides fires and medicals, what kind of things do you guys go into?
Yeah, sure. Just before I answer that, there's definitely a preconceived idea that fires are less in Massachusetts. And the truth is that's actually not true. I just think it's important to tell people that we have just as many fires as we've had in the city for the last 100 years. The difference is that our call volume for everything else has gone up so far. So it's not that we're really doing less fires, and with new fire prevention codes and building construction and other things, the fires are not huge. Like the fire we had yesterday, if we were a smaller community, you would have seen it all over the news because the house probably would have burned down to the ground. Wow. But because we're staffed well enough and we have a good water supply in Attleboro, that's another important part of it, that there's hydrants every place. So we're able to get a significant amount of water on a fire. There's a lot of science that goes into firefighting, but there's also, you can't get around the fact that if you have enough manpower and you have enough water, you're going to most of the times get the fire out quick. So we're fortunate that we can do that. Some of those other towns don't have that luxury. So we still have typically 200 to 300 fires a year.
Wow. And
people don't realize that. We had a fatal house fire a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We just had a house fire yesterday. But the other types of calls that we do a lot of, we had a search at the reservoir the other day. We got a call of a potential kayaker flipped over, ended up being unfounded, but the guys were out there for several hours, just making sure that there was nobody out there. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of those types of rescues. Car accidents, unfortunately, we respond to quite a bit. Industrial accidents, elevator emergencies, water rescues, weather emergencies. And then there's another common thing is just public assist. People need help for any unknown reason. We're the department that they call. If they're not sure who to call, they call us. And whether it's, we go sometimes for a kid, a small child with his head stuck in the railings in the banister, things like that. When they don't know who to call, they call us. Yep. And it's a jack of all trades. We do pretty much everything. Wow.
Thank you from me and all of us in the city for providing those services. We're going to get to some more of that in a minute here. So thanks for putting context around all that. But I want to talk about you for a quick second here, Chief. How long have you been? You said 14 years, but how long have you been with the department itself?
So I've been with the department. I'm in my 25th year.
Okay, great. Quarter century. Thank you. I want to get into your head a little bit. What's it like to run into a burning building, not knowing the uncertainty that could happen at any moment? People on your team running into danger when people are trying to get out. Do you still go into buildings right now?
I myself personally, no, okay. I won't go in. And most of my shift commanders don't. When we're managing a scene, it's outside.
Yep.
So
you're taking on the larger picture logistics. Okay.
Yeah, big picture and directing the actions of the rest of the companies on the scene.
Okay.
So the captains, lieutenants, and all of the firefighters are regularly going into fires. And it's funny, I still remember all the firefighters go to the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy, and you learn how to do structural firefighting there. There's a whole science behind it. They all get certified. as an NFPA certification for firefighter 1 and 2. So when they come back from the academy, that's how I know as a chief and the city knows that these people have been trained to a national standard. We're actually fortunate. Massachusetts is one of the few states in the country that has a fire academy. And our fire academy is free. We don't pay any tuition. The fire academy is fully funded by money that's collected as part of insurance policies in the Commonwealth. So it's a great resource for the fire department. When my guys go, they're there for 12 weeks, for full-time Monday through Friday. So they're prepared when they come out. But those buildings, when you're practicing in those buildings, there is live fire, but it's bales of hay.
Okay.
So they know you go in there and you're in the brick building with a bale of hay, and eventually it's just going to go out by itself. Yeah. So that is the biggest difference when a new firefighter goes into a fire for the first time. It's that they know isn't going to go out by itself. Mm-hmm. But we're fortunate we have experienced officers, so the firefighter is never put in a position to panic. And the way we operate, normally the first line in, the firefighter has a nozzle. The captain or lieutenant is right behind him, usually with a hand on his shoulder, because you can't see. That's the biggest thing that people think. What on television is not at all like a fire. Nobody's walking around. It's pitch dark. You're looking for a little bit of a glow, and most of what they do is by feel. So when we're in there in the building, the first thing they're doing is not looking to put the fire out. That confuses a lot of the citizens sometimes, because we don't put it out first. We actually go in looking for victims, because if you start spraying water, you don't know where the victims are. So they will try to extinguish a fire at the same time if it makes sense, but most of the time, the first few minutes, they're in the room that's on fire, and they're crawling around seeing if there's anybody on the floor. Okay. It's all by feel.
So I hear that's the preliminary search, right? So after the preliminary search, do the firefighters put water on the fire and then do a secondary search if necessary?
Yeah,
Is that how that works?
And as more resources show up, sometimes those two things will be going on simultaneously.
Okay.
So usually like the first company in is doing a quick search. We call it a primary search. The next engine company that arrives, their job is to get a water supply and get a hose in place to protect the guys that are inside doing the search, because sometimes when they're doing a search, they don't bring a hose in if they don't have time. Mm-hmm. So that's why everything has to be coordinated. And then the next line in would be based on the deputy's decision on what's going on outside. They might be going to the floor above to do a quick search. Gotcha. But we always start on the floor that's on fire. Then we'll go to the floor that's above. And at that same time, now the crews are starting to put the fire out. And then after that is all accomplished, the next thing we do is what's called a secondary search. Might be different companies coming into the building, but the places that were already searched once now get a more thorough search. And it's a lot of it's simultaneous, and it probably takes 15 minutes. Most fires, if you have the staff, you get the fires pretty much out in 15 minutes. Okay. And then you spend the next 45 minutes. We call it overhaul, where basically we're making sure that there's no fire concealed in the walls, because the last thing you want to do is leave the house and 2 hours later have it reignite. Yeah. So they'll be doing that. And the ladder companies do some different things, like cutting holes in the roof, because a big part of firefighting is actually getting the hot air out, because sometimes it's too hot for the crews to actually operate inside. So they'll actually call it ventilation. They'll actually put a hole in the roof to direct the heat and fire out to a certain direction so that the firefighters can operate inside. So there's a lot of strategy that goes in behind it.
Yeah, I just learned a ton from you right there, Chief. So thank you so much for all of that. I appreciate it. You mentioned, sadly, a few weeks ago, we did have a deadly fire. You and your team have to see a lot of terrible things, and it can be very traumatic when it comes to mental health for firefighters and your team. So I'm wondering what kind of programs and services are available for firefighters.
So there are a couple of, we have critical incident stress teams throughout the state. There's some that are run from the PFFM, the Firefighters Union, but there's also separate state ones that are operated. And we have full access to all of those. We actually do use them quite a bit. It was something that when I first got on the fire department, that was something that nobody wanted to do. People are much more aware of mental health issues today. And there's been several cases that I haven't even made it voluntary. I've mandated that the crews, but the company will come down here and do it, and I gave them no option. We had many years ago, we had a 7-year-old drowning, which was a horrible scene, and especially when you see it. And I have younger firefighters, And I know it going through their head because honestly, it was the same thing that was going through my head. When you're trained, you go in and you do your job. But after it settles and that did not have a good outcome, you can't help but thinking about your own family. That's just the reality of life. And you can see how it really starts to affect the guys. And now they start to have doubts about, did we do everything we could? And is there something we should have done better? And now they feel guilty thinking about their son. And the incident debriefing teams are really good at, none of it's recorded, it's completely anonymous, so that people can go in there and say exactly what they're feeling without being judged, which is important because you need to have somebody who's lived through it to let you vent.
That's a powerful resource for sure. So all of this sounds very stressful, but very important. With everything you just mentioned, Chief, why do you enjoy being the chief of the Attleboro Fire Department?
It's not every day is fun, but it was always something I had wanted to do, although I didn't anticipate starting it as early in my career as I had. But I always felt that I had the skill set to move the department into a little bit more modern way of operating, which we're still not the most modern in the Commonwealth, but we're certainly caught up quite a bit. And especially with younger employees, they have an expectation that departments do things more modernly. We have a lot of technology now, which is something we didn't used to have. All of our policies and procedures are online, cloud-based. All of our scheduling software. So I can be at my house and I can pull up on a phone app. I can see every piece of apparatus in the city, and I can see where my people are staffed. Same scheduling vacation and sick leave and all of that stuff is all done electronically now. So that was a big difference because we were doing everything by paper for a long time, and today's generation is expecting that everything is right at your fingertips. We have a huge amount of online training resources now. That's a new thing. We have the paramedics and EMTs have to do a couple hundred hours of training every year. But we also have an online component for the firefighters because most of the firefighters probably do an average of 2 to 3 hours a day of fire department training that's separate from EMS. And a lot of it, because of the nature of how they work, it's online, but they can do it at the fire station because if you try to do it in person, it's hard because of calls. They end up getting called out all the time. So we found some good platforms that allow us to do that online. I also, my background before the fire service was electrical engineering. So that's what I went to college for. Okay. And I actually worked as an engineer for several years before I made the jump to public safety. And it was funny that I found a lot of the stuff in my college degree turned out to be beneficial with the fire codes. We deal with a lot of electrical issues, electric hazards and stuff. So it was a funny progression to become the chief. There was always a part of me that felt like I could do it at some point, but it was much earlier than was on the plan.
That's usually how it works, huh? So that is interesting. Why electrical engineer? Why did you want to make the switch into public safety?
It sounds funny. Yeah. So when I was in college, I loved academics. I really thrived in that environment. I really liked it. As most young people at that age, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. How could you at that age? And when I graduated, I worked for a few years, and depending on the work we're doing, I enjoyed it. But I got to the point that I honestly would say to myself, I don't know if I can sit in a desk for 40, 50 hours a week for the rest of my life. So I started looking at other things, and I didn't even know it at the time, but I took an EMT class, and I told my father that I was considering going to leave the career and become an EMT or a paramedic or something. And all he said to me was, just do what makes you happy. And my father was a high school teacher, and he said to me, don't ever go get a career for money. He said, make your lifestyle match what you want to do. I said, okay, that's pretty good advice. So I became an EMT. I had always wanted to be a firefighter, but I had no idea how. Every guy at some point, most young men at some point say, I want to be a fireman. Yep. And never had a clue how to make it happen. Then I became an EMT, worked for a private ambulance service, and met some people who were trying to get on fire departments and learned how the process works. And then became a paramedic. I tried to get onto Somerset, which was where I grew up. That didn't work out. And then I got a civil service card from Attleboro. Turned out to be the best opportunity. Never looked back. Nice. But it was funny that once I got on, even the former chief, Ron Churchill, said to me, I was not in the department very long. And he actually said to me, he said, you're going to be sitting in my chair someday. And I was like, yeah, you are out of your mind.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. Thank you for providing all that for us. I want to switch gears a little bit now. So different topic here. So I want to talk about what to do if one of Attleboro residents find ourselves in danger. So when I was a kid, I remember the fire department showing up to our school with this nice trailer camper thing. It was like a simulation of what it was like to be inside a home. I think it was like 2 stories as well. We learned the best ways to get out safely, touching the doorknobs and doing the stop, drop, and roll, things like that. So do a lot of those principles still hold true if we find ourselves inside a structure where flames are ripping through? How do we get out? How do we give ourselves the best chance to get out safely?
Yeah, so none of that's really changed. The only thing that has changed, and sometimes people are overconfident with buildings and they think that the buildings are fireproof. But what ends up happening is that the contents never are. So even in a building that has a fire sprinkler system and a state-of-the-art fire alarm system, the one thing we do see now is that people are not as quick to get out of the buildings as they should be because they don't think it's going to be as big of a deal, but that can backfire very quickly. So the one thing we still emphasize all the time is that, well, 2 things that people should do all the time when they have an emergency, whether it's a small fire or something else, is they should get out and call 911. And the quicker they do both of those things, the better outcome is. We also encourage people to have, it's nice to have some kind of a plan for your house or your business. And we're happy to help people develop those plans, but they have to practice them. And the plan can be really simple. Is if the alarms go off, everybody gets outside and meets in the front yard. Doesn't have to be much more than that, and call 911. We do a lot with the schools, and it's interesting to see how common young kids, their biggest concern 100% of the time if there's a fire is, what about my pets? So parents and stuff, they think they're doing the right thing by saying that don't worry about the pet, just leave them. And what we tell them is that's a very unrealistic thing to tell a 6-year-old who is madly in love with their dog or their cat or whatever it is. I said, so you really want to help them, make that part of your plan. You want to get a young child to buy into a plan. So you put a small carry crate in the kid's bedroom. And if he has a small dog that sleeps in the room with him, and you practice a drill a couple of times a year. And part of the drill is that he picks up the puppy, puts him in the cage, and he carries him outside. And I explained to the family there's 2 reasons for that. That one is that child is going to go search for that dog if the house catches on fire. That's not, statistically, they're not going to just go running out. They're going to go look. So the best thing you can do is every night have the puppy in the room with the kid and make that part of the plan. The other part that you can also, part of the plan with the kids, is you build the confidence in them that if for some reason your pet is not in your room and the kids love that pet, the best thing that kid can do is get out of the building right away, because the quicker that they get out and we get there, like I told you before, we search for people first. Mm-hmm. If they're all outside and the family members, the father and mother says, hey, everybody's accounted for, but there is a cat or a dog in the house, we won't go do a special search for the cat or the dog, but we'll put the fire out, because now we're not worried about people. And putting the fire out is that animal's best chance of survival. And kids, they're pretty resilient when you talk to them. We don't scare them, but we tell them the truth. And we say, we're not going to go search for the cat, but if you're in a building, we're going to spend all of our time looking for you, and we're never going to find your cat. So if you really want that cat to survive, that's what we want you to do. Make that part of your plan. Get out, quick call. And it's interesting to see the conversations that the kids and the parents start to have with that.
Yeah, I remember having those conversations myself as a kid, so that's good to hear. Get out, call 911. Got it, Chief. You touched on this a little bit. You said water levels are good, so I'm curious. So as it stands now, water levels extremely low in the city, right? Water bans in place for homeowners, low water levels. Are they concerning for the fire department? You said good water sources, but does the water level impact the fire department?
It could, but I speak to the water department superintendent routinely. There is no risk at the moment for firefighting, although we would use an awful lot of water. But even the water that's just in the tank is enough for the city for several days, even if there was no water in the reservoir. The only way it would be an issue is if we had massive fires in the city that went on for days and days, which then we have other options for water supply. We can draft out of the other rivers and other things. But overall, we're pretty fortunate. We have a good water supply. Good.
That's good to hear. Is there anything you'd like to share with the people of Attleboro when it comes to fire prevention, monitoring certain things inside our home so an accidental fire doesn't start, or we're approaching fall here, more people burning outside? What can we do to not get ourselves into trouble?
All right. Sure. A couple of points there. So outside burning is in Massachusetts, that's regulated by the Department of Environmental Protection, but the permits are issued from the fire service. So we issue the permits for outside burning. It's important that if somebody is going to burn that they call the fire department each morning when they even if they have a permit, they still have to call because there'll be a recorded message about whether or not you can burn on certain days. It's interesting because the DEP's days that they don't want you to burn opposite of the fire service. Like the fire service, we like you to burn when it's damp and rainy out. But DEP doesn't like that. They want the atmosphere, they want it dry so that the smoke and the fumes dissipate better. So that's why it's not, you can't burn every day that you might think that you could. That's why you have to call each morning to find out. The other thing is, by regulation, you're supposed to be at least 25 to 50 feet away from a structure. But the biggest issue we see is people don't have a garden hose by, and that is when they get themselves into a little bit of trouble if they don't have a garden hose and the fire gets away from them, because by the time they can get the hose set up, now they end up calling us, and it's not a big deal for us, but it's a pretty big deal for them when we show up and we have to put like a quarter of an acre out of their yard that was burning pretty good. Or sometimes they end up burning a shed down or a fence, which would be avoidable if they had a hose. So that's a big thing. Another thing that I love to tell people is carbon monoxide detectors. Probably one of the best things people should put in their houses, and all the new houses have them. That's part of the building code. And if you sell a house today, the code is you have to have carbon monoxide alarms. But I like to tell people that it's not a requirement by the code, but there is a specific type of carbon monoxide alarm that you can plug in, but it has a digital LED display on it that actually tells you the carbon monoxide levels. It should always be 0. Now, because carbon monoxide alarms in houses are not designed to sound until the level is 40 parts per million for an hour or 80 parts per million immediately. Those are levels that are going to make you sick pretty quick. And the one that has a digital readout should always be 0. And so when we do our fire prevention tours, that's what we tell people. And a lot of them go by them, and they usually thank us later at some point because you can have a very small leak in your heating system that wouldn't trigger the regular alarms, but all of a sudden you're seeing this readout that says 2 parts per million in your kitchen. It's not an emergency.
Right.
You don't have to leave your house, but you should call your heating company because there's a problem. And it's amazing how accurate those things are and how much trouble it can save people. So,
how much do they cost?
They're probably $40.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's an easy investment.
I used to get some for my family members for Christmas.
Okay. That's a great
And
gift.
you just take it and you plug it. I tell people, put it right in your kitchen, right on the kitchen counter, because you see it all the time.
Yeah. That's the most fire chief Christmas gift I've ever heard. I love that. Monitor. That's awesome. Yeah. That's good information, all of that there, Chief. Thank you. Can we switch gears again?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. I want the people of Attleboro to get to know you even better. You mentioned already, but where did you grow up and any siblings?
I grew up in Somerset, Massachusetts, and I have one sister. Her name is Susan.
Very good. Where did you go to high school? And you mentioned college. Where was college?
Yeah, I went to Somerset High School, and then I went to, now it's UMass Dartmouth, but when I went, it was SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University, before it changed to UMass.
Very cool. What was your very first job? Not out of college, but even in high school.
My first job? So where I lived, there was a farm, and I worked on a farm since I was 12 years old.
Cool.
And a lot of the neighborhood kids did, and a lot of my uncles worked at that farm when they were kids. So it was just something that kind of fell in me. I worked there for 10 years. Loved it.
That's awesome. When did you become a firefighter? So was it with Attleboro 25 years ago?
Yes.
First department?
Yeah,
Got it.
It was Attleboro, yeah.
Got it. Okay. I recently featured Kim Canova, the owner of the Blackington Inn, on a podcast, and she told me that you actually got married there. So there's a fun fact.
That is true, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
How was that? How long ago was that?
So it was interesting. So I said my wife and I were both remarried, and we wanted to have something that was really nice, but we didn't want to have something that's ridiculously over the top.
Yeah.
And she was looking at places, and my wife is from Somerset and Westport, so she had no knowledge of Attleboro at all. And I had said, "What about the Blackington Inn in Attleboro?" And she's, "I don't know." And when I got her to come up here, she fell madly in love with the place.
Oh, cool.
Madly in love. We stayed there the first night. We stayed overnight one night before we went on the honeymoon.
Nice.
It was perfect. There's a limit with the number of people. I think we were capped at around 50, 55 or so. But we had everybody that went, and it was mostly family because the number of 50, we had to keep it down. Mm-hmm. And she was a great help to us coordinating all of the wedding. When I say my family said it was probably, if not the best, one of the nicest weddings they've ever seen. It was just classy, elegant. The food was fantastic. The DJ was great. The location was great. The staff was awesome.
That's awesome.
So my wife and I go there a couple times a year just to revisit and reminisce about the wedding.
And how long ago was the wedding?
That was almost 6 years ago.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Any children?
Yep, I have a son, Michael, who's in college right now. He'll be turning 20 very soon.
What's he studying?
He is studying biology right now.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, he's playing hockey upstate New York, and he actually wants to get into the fire service now. So that's something he'd had no interest in before. But yeah. My wife has 3 children. A daughter, Ashley, she is 29. Son, David, who's 27, and a son, Ryan, who is 32.
Nice. Congratulations to both of you on all of that. What do you do for fun when you're not working?
My wife makes me do a lot of stuff around the house. So I do a lot of small projects. I like landscaping my yard, but I like camping. I like to go fishing, mostly freshwater fishing. I go a lot of hikes with my dogs. I take them hiking pretty much every single day. Nice. Hanging out with my family.
Big golfer?
No, I used to golf, but it didn't relax me. It made me angry.
Stressed you out.
So I was like the opposite of why I wanted to be there.
That's a darn good point. All right, Chief. So professionally, you are certainly used to rapid fire, but the real question is, are you ready for the Life in Attleboro rapid fire round?
I will find out, right?
All right, let's do it. Favorite restaurant in the city and why?
It's the Blockington, and I already told you why. So.
I was going to guess that, so there we go. That was easy. When it comes to vacation, are you a beach bum, skiing in the mountains, or something totally different?
I like the beach for vacations.
Love it. What is something most people don't know about you?
That I can juggle.
Really? Like
yes.
Tennis balls or flaming chainsaws? How many tennis balls? How many tennis balls?
I can only do 3. I taught myself in college.
That's a fun fact right there. How many games are the Patriots going to win this season?
Oh boy, I'm gonna say 2, and I'm being
2. Love that. I'm gonna go for. I think Jacoby's gonna get a game early on, and then I don't know. Maybe we'll squeak 3 more. 2 from the Chief. You heard it right there. Okay. So I have a quick story for you. My best friend is a police lieutenant out in Western Mass, and he always tells me that police always show up first to the scene. Why do you think that is, Chief? Is that right? Why do police always show up first?
Well, first, I won't say always, but I can see why a police officer would say that. But it's the nature of how they respond. They're out driving and we're at the stations. That's the main reason why. But what's funny now is with the call volume, and I have these conversations with Chief Hagney quite a bit, it's not uncommon for the fire department to show up to a call for a car accident waiting for the police department to show up now because they're so busy.
Right.
But I would say that they probably do get there before us most of the time.
It's a team effort for sure. I appreciate you.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chief Scott Lachance, I would like to say thank you very much for everything you and your department do for us in our city. And I really appreciate you being a guest on the Life in Attleboro podcast. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate it.
I really hope you enjoyed our conversation with Attleboro Fire Chief Scott Lachance. Hey, can you please do me a favor? If you're enjoying the Life in Attleboro podcast, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it. Also, make sure you're signed up for our email list. That's where you're going to get exclusive benefits, including early access to every new podcast episode, special savings at Attleboro restaurants and businesses, and you'll also stay in the know about cool events in our great city. Just go to lifeinattleboro.com and you'll see the sign-up display right there on the homepage. And if you know someone who would make a great guest on our podcast, please shoot us an email at lifeinattleboro@gmail.com. That's it for today. Life in Attleboro is a great thing. Support our community, promote positivity, and make a stranger smile. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Life in Attleboro podcast.